Good afternoon, and welcome to the Akron Roundtable. I am Michael Schwartz, President of the Akron Roundtable Board of Directors. The Roundtable is brought to you over radio station WKSU 89.7 FM from the Quaker Station at the Quaker Inn on the campus of the University of Akron in downtown. The radio broadcast is underwritten by Cascade Outing. Today's program is generously sponsored by the Akron Community Foundation and the law firm Buckingham, Doolittle & Burroughs, LLC. Additionally, we'd like to recognize the Akron Beacon Journal and Ohio.com for being a legacy sponsor of the Akron Roundtable. Please mark your calendar now for our next Roundtable luncheon scheduled for Friday, May 15th. That's a change in our usual cadence of the third Thursday, so please mark your calendar for Friday, May 15th, when the Akron Roundtable will host Louis W. Sullivan, MD, President Emeritus at the Morehouse School of Medicine, who will present on the topic, Transforming the Health Profession, Turning Mission into Action. To make a reservation for any of the Akron Roundtable luncheons or to purchase a subscription to our luncheon series, please visit our website at akronroundtable.org. Today, the Akron Roundtable is very excited and pleased to host a diverse group of community leaders in a dialogue which follows up on the Akron Beacon Journal series, Who Will Lead? The title of this panel is aptly named #Akron Leader, Building the Conversation. We encourage you to help build the conversation through social media via Twitter and Facebook. Without further ado, I am pleased to introduce today's panel discussion moderator, David Hunter, Senior Partner at Brouse McDowell and Chair of the Akron Roundtable's Programming Committee.
Thank you, Michael. Several weeks ago, the Akron Beacon Journal published a series about the anticipated changes in leadership, which have been and will be occurring in all sectors of our region, in business, in government, in nonprofit organizations, and in our schools and universities. The series seemed to strike a responsive chord throughout our community, generating some responses and answers, and also prompting a bumper crop of questions. Today's Akron Roundtable luncheon presentation, entitled Building the Conversation, is intended to do just that, to explore more fully the various facets of the ongoing and anticipated transformational sea change in area leadership. Joining us for the conversation today are four leaders in our community. From your left to right, they are Virginia Albanese. Virginia is the President and CEO of FedEx Custom Critical, a leading North American expedited freight carrier located in Greene, Ohio. Virginia, who earned her Bachelor of Science degree and EMGA degree from Kent State University, has been recognized for her leadership both at work and in the community. 51 years young, Virginia is the past chair of the Greater Akron Chamber of Commerce and currently serves on the Board of Trustees of her alma mater, as well as on the boards of Akron Children's Hospital Medical Center and the Akron Community Foundation. Next to Virginia is Rob Briggs, and Rob was named last year as the president of the Northeast Ohio Council on Higher Education. Rob has had a celebrated career in private law practice with Buckingham, Doolittle & Burroughs, where, among other things, he served as its president and CEO, and later as its chairman of the board. A graduate of Duke University and the Ohio State University College of Law, Rob has been recognized for his leadership in business and for his professional and civic involvement. Our senior-most panelist at age 73, Rob has served the community in a variety of capacities, including as president of the GAR Foundation and as chair and trustee of the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. Seated next to Rob is Traci Buckner. Traci currently serves as the director of specialty programs for the Akron Public Schools. Prior to her present responsibilities, she served as the founding instructional leader of the National Inventors Hall of Fame School Center for STEM Learning. With a Bachelor of Arts degree from the Ohio State University and a Master's of Education degree from John Carroll University, Traci has been fully immersed in community activities, including the United Way of Summit County, Leadership Akron, Torchbearers, and Great Lakes Biomimicry, where she serves as a member of its board. She also frequently serves as a presenter at various regional and national conferences. Traci is 42 years young, but declares she liked being age 38 a lot. Our final panelist seated next to Traci is Mark Scheffler. Our youngest panelist at age 37, Mark is the executive leader of Leadership Akron. He has served in that capacity for the past decade. With a BA in political science from Grove City College and a master's in public administration from The Ohio State University, Mark has received a number of awards and honors, including being a member of the charter class of the Greater Akron Chamber 30 for the Future. Active in the community, Mark currently serves on the boards of Akron Roundtable and the United Way of Summit County. Let me quickly add that as we began to assemble a nimble foursome to engage in this conversation, we knew it would be virtually impossible to capture all viewpoints among just 4 panelists. Notwithstanding, we know our diverse quartet will present an array of viewpoints in what we anticipate to be a lively conversation. And, as is the Akron Roundtable tradition, we will conclude our luncheon presentation today with written questions from the audience. So to start off a conversation about leadership, we first have to get an insight on what is a leader. So a question I'll toss out to all 4 of you, I want you to all chime in, is how would you define and describe a leader? What characteristics does an effective leader possess?
I'll jump in and go ahead. I really think that a leader is somebody who can motivate other people towards a better tomorrow in whatever they're doing. Somebody who can really bring folks along and empower people to make decisions and to make mistakes and to grow from those mistakes, and really be a champion for the team members. So I really think it's somebody who can motivate and bring people along.
I would add to that, not only motivate, which is very critical, but to inspire. To inspire your team of colleagues to achieve the goals or objectives or mission of your organization in a collaborative and team-oriented way. Inspiring, I think, is a very key word for a good leader.
I think that being a good leader is somebody who's courageous and not afraid to take risks and take chances. And oftentimes you're out there on your own, but you have to remember your purpose. You have to remember people. And I think people are at the center of everything that people do, and should be at the center of everything that people do. And remembering that you're going to make some mistakes and it's going to be okay, but you'll learn from them. And that's one of the signs I believe of a good leader.
And hard to know what to add to all of that, which is all great observations. One thing that really resonates with me is servant leadership. So the leader is first of all one who serves, who seeks to serve the best interests of their community and the others that they have the privilege to lead.
I'm going to stay with you, Mark, on the next question, which is, how important is character in a leader? Can a leader with character flaws still be effective through a type of compartmentalization? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that certainly achievement is possible with or without character, and a big part of leadership is setting a vision, and there are charismatic leaders who can accomplish that. For me, leadership often is a function of trust, because to inspire others to action greater than themselves, there needs to be a strong sense of trust in the leader, and that's certainly a function of character as well.
Anybody else care to add on that?
The compartmentalization is a unique characterization, and we have had leaders who have been able to compartmentalize their idiosyncratic behavior compared to their leadership behavior, and I guess I don't categorize them as really the true leaders to which I think most of us aspire. I think it's really important to have the integrity and the ethics to go along with it.
You know, a lot of this conversation, which precedes this luncheon, will certainly carry on after this concludes, is focused on trying to get a broader spectrum of leadership in our community. And when we speak to the issue of diversity, it can touch many characteristics: gender, age, race, culture, values, just to name a few. And I'll direct this to Virginia if I could. Why is diversity within a leadership group important?
I think this is a good question and one that everybody has to really understand before they can really start working on the diversity in their own organization. Because if you don't understand why diversity is important, it's hard to get there. But to me, diversity is important because if you have a group of people who all, and I'll say, look the same, come from the same background, belong to the same club, go to the same church, or if everybody is the same, all of the thoughts that come out will be very much the same. The ideas, the execution, everything will be the same. And what I see at our company, and I'm very pleased with the diversity on our team, is we have people from all walks of life, from many different backgrounds and living different places, etc. And when we come to the table, people are coming with these diverse backgrounds and diverse experiences that they can share to really come up with a best solution when we're looking towards the future. So to me, when people understand that when you bring people of different experiences and different backgrounds together, it is so impactful on the manner in which you can run your company. And many studies show that a company that has diversity has a lot better opportunity to make a better top line and certainly a better bottom line.
I'd like to add to that. I think that you have to be purposeful in deciding how you will diversify your organizations. And I think oftentimes people, I think that we're a pretty polite community and we don't necessarily like to talk about race. And I think that's just only one aspect of diversity, and we have to think about age and all sorts of things. And in the article that Betty Lynn Fisher contributed to today in the Beacon, it talked about the percentage of women being, a lot less on the boards that exist across the community. And it's not just gender, but it's also age. But what it did say was that people recommend people who they're comfortable with. So we've got to start getting outside of our comfort zone, which is easier said than done.
Traci, you're omniscient. You're anticipating my next question about today's extensive article on the front page of the Beacon about the composition of governing boards of the area's largest publicly held for-profit corporations as well as nonprofit organizations. What are the consequences when we have this imbalance, and how does that change?
Would you like for me to
And
address
if you'll
that?
start, that would be great.
I think the consequences are pretty scary because you'll end up with organizations that remain the same, and when you remain the same, things don't improve. And, we were able to, Mark and I both traveled on the Akron to Detroit trip with the Knight Foundation and Calcutta Chief, and also the Akron to Pittsburgh trip. And we found that although things looked dim and grim there in those cities, they made some changes. They were courageous. They took some chances, and it pays off. But you have to really be intentional.
I just want to jump in and talk a little bit even about the last question. But I think people talk about diversity, and you're right, Traci. It's certainly not just race, and it's certainly not just gender. I mean, there's many different things around diversity. And one of the things that I like to look at as well is the way people approach problems, right? Even in diversity in, risk taking, or, you don't want everybody on the team to be the crazy risk taker who kind of reckless abandon. But you also don't want everybody on the team to be, we always call this, kind of the blue person who's very much, everything's got to have a number, everything's got to be data driven, and we can never have enough numbers. You need a great blend even of that, of the risk-taking versus the data analytics, etc. So diversity is a whole lot of things, and I do think when people start talking diversity, they think black, white, man, woman, sexual preference, all these different things, but there is so much more to it than just those things that we see.
Yeah, one dimensionality, I think, in any form is a risk to not having the full picture. And I think one of the pieces in Betty's article today was about how selection of leaders tends to happen based on the networks of social relationships or relationships that people have. And if the responsibility of leaders and organizations to be intentional about building diverse networks for themselves so that in selecting and creating opportunities for leaders to step up, we're able to see a full diversity that reflects the diversity of our community. And platforms like Leadership Akron, like Akron Roundtable, which get people out of their normal course of activity and connecting with leaders from all kinds of backgrounds and sectors is one way to do that.
And I think again, Traci said it earlier, is diversity is intentional. Things, people are not going to drop into your lap who fit the right profile, because you do end up going out and getting people people who are like you, people that you hang out with, if you will. And I've been very impressed to see a number of the boards that I sit on here in Akron are getting really intentional about who they're going to get next on the board. I know I was talking with John Paturis from Akron Community Foundation recently about a potential board member, and he came back to me and said, hey, listen, let me tell you who we're looking for, the types of people that we're looking for. And it was very intentional around diversity, looking at what we have on our board. And I've seen that at Akron Children's Hospital. So I'm really pleased and encouraged with the intentionality of the board selections.
I'd like to move on to how we can spot leaders, and I want to start with Rob on this. Rob, with your experience at your law firm and your foundation work and your extensive involvement in the community, how do we spot people that have leadership potential? Are leaders born, or are they more or less groomed?
I would say neither. I don't think leaders are born. And I think leaders are maybe groomed to some extent. For example, if you're in England and happen to be born into royalty, you're groomed. That's pretty much the way it is. But I think leaders are developed through mentors, through observation, through a tremendous amount of hard work. And it's really important to, if somebody wants to assume a leadership position, to try to adopt a mentor, and vice versa. Leaders should adopt potential leaders in their organizations. But those characteristics of a good leader being a good listener, having some humility, having the ability to be empathic with the people whom you're leading, all those characteristics which we know represent a good leader have to be developed. And my experience is that you can spot potential leaders pretty early on, because they're the ones who won't say no to any assignment, will do their very best every time, and are working at maximum capacity. And so those are the folks that you want to develop. And there's some slower folks who develop that you need to pay attention to as well. I think definitely leaders are developed.
I'd like to build on your response, Rob, and I direct this to Traci to start off the conversation. You'd mentioned, Rob, about mentoring, and I'd like the four of you to chime in on how important mentoring is for you. Who were some of the people who were your mentors, and do we have sufficient sort of salt and pepper haired senior people who will devote the time to cultivate that younger talent to be the kind of leaders we'd like to see in our region?
I did have mentors, and I do have mentors, and sometimes they pick me, and sometimes I pick them, and sometimes they don't even know that I picked them, because I look at them and I find things that I can learn. And I can remember, years ago, and just growing up, I'm from Northeast Ohio, Cleveland Heights area, but I had wonderful people in my life who encouraged me and helped sort of lead me down the path of leadership. There's Leadership Cleveland, and then there is an organization called Look Up to Cleveland, which is for students who are in high school. And I can remember years ago being a part of that and planning for what we think the city should look like 20 years later. And I also remember, and I met my husband interning, and that was through an organization called Inroads, which is for minority students to be able to have an opportunity to get into the corporate workforce and learn on the ground. I was probably a senior in high school, and I can remember all of the experiences that I had helped shape me. I ended up getting into education after working in business for a little bit, but I'm able to merge the skills and qualities from both of those sectors together. But I'm able to do that because I had people along the way that I can look to, even preparing for the panel today, which is hard to prepare because I have no idea what some of the questions I see you waving around out there might be. But I talk to people and ask their thoughts, and even this morning people were talking with me about leadership. So it's important to surround ourselves with people who can lift us up, who can tell us if we're not doing something quite right. I've had some people in my lives tell me, you should not do that anymore, in the workplace. And it was just wear my hair a certain way. But I listened and I never wore it that way again. But that's being courageous enough and taking the responsibility to care about someone else's future, because then it helps all of our future better.
I think that mentors are so incredibly important, and I would venture to say that every single person in this room has had a mentor or has mentors. I'm a proponent of certainly folks that work for me is for them to have mentors internal to our organization, but also external to the organization. And the other thing is to have mentors who are diverse from you. I have men who are great mentors to me, and I have women who are great mentors to me, because you do get different perspectives, and certainly their experiences as they've gone through life, they can really lend a lot to you. So definitely very high on the mentorship. I think the other thing is when we talk about kind of leaders as well as being how to develop a leader, and Traci said this too, is experiences are so important, and I think that's one of the things that we can all do very intentionally for our team members who either work for us or surround us, is to let people either just getting involved in a board, having young professionals, for instance, getting involved on our boards, but like in my organization, is moving people who are high potential around to different departments. A lot of times people will say, oh, we can't afford to move them. And it's like, no, you cannot. You can possibly miss the opportunity to move them so they get these experiences so they can be incredibly confident leaders and well-rounded and knowledgeable. So I think that's another thing that we can do, is really give people the experiences they need to be our next leaders.
I'd like to focus now a little bit on what I'll call the incubation process. One of the phrases that's found its way into the conversation has been the concept of paying dues, and I don't know if I like to use that term or not, but is there a certain, germination period here to cultivate effective leadership skills in the next generation? I'd like to hear from all four of you if I could.
It just depends. It depends on the individual. Some folks come into an organization and they have started the top-itis, and they think, this is where I should be. I should be a VP, and in a few years the CEO. But most, I think, come in maybe a little timidly and try to feel their way. But it's up to the leadership, the CEO and her or his team, to look after new folks who come in. And there is an incubation period, but some go through it more quickly than others. And it's the obligation of leadership to help build that, I think, over time.
I think one thing that I see with a lot of our graduates at Leadership Akron is the community, and Torchbearers exemplify this as well, our affiliate for emerging leaders. And the community, for many of them, is a fruitful arena to be involved in ways that they have an opportunity to demonstrate leadership. And there's involvement. Often if you're persistent about getting involved and taking on a significant community of projects and able to generate results with those projects, that gets recognized, and before you know it, you find yourself being asked to take on leadership roles, maybe more than you bargained for when you first got started.
I think sometimes people, that have that start at the top itis, they just don't have the wisdom that it takes. And I can remember being moved around and not understanding why to different places in the workplace. And now I know why. I can look back and I can say, oh wow, look what I learned here and there. And it's again, our responsibility to make sure that we give people a chance to learn different things, face different problems, find different ways to solve things. So, you know, you do have to sort of pay your dues, but then those in leadership have to recognize when you've got a hard worker who might be ready for the next level, because you don't want to make that person feel as if, you know, gosh, I'm never going to get to be whatever it is at the top. And leaders don't always have to be the CEOs of organizations.
Right. This conversation has prompted a lot of tea leaf reading and people trying to speculate and forecast what this change is going to mean for the community. And this may merely be anecdotal, but about a month ago, the Beacon Journal had an article about, an extensive article about the 9 members of the new leadership team that was reporting directly to Summa Health System's newly installed CEO, Tom Malone, Dr. Malone. And of those 9 direct reports, 1 was a minority, 3 were women, 6 were white men. Of the 9, 7 were 55 years old or older. 1 was 45 and 1 was 37. So I'm not trying to pile on you, but I'm just trying to use this as an example. Is this merely an anecdotal occurrence, or is it evidence of the type of gradual leadership shift we might expect to witness in other organizations in our region? What do you say?
I think that they're being intentional about really looking. I think it's a gradual shift, and what we are going to see is a gradual shift over time. We're not going to turn around tomorrow and bang, every board, every organization has this wonderfully diverse, but I'm seeing this intentionality of getting, exactly what they're doing is they thought that through. They thought that through very well. And I think that we're going to see more and more of it.
Other observations here?
I think it's a fiduciary obligation of every leadership team to aspire to have a diverse group of thinkers, of people reflecting the community. Sometimes it's a little tougher, especially with smaller organizations, but you have to do it. And either not just in the boardroom, but as employees, staff, and so on. And if we don't do that, then we're going to have more serious problems down the line in our society. So I think that's, plus I would also add in the educational attainment issue, which we all have to focus on as well.
It's interesting. I think the other thing is, people, you talk about it's not easy always to get that diversity, but it's possible. It is possible. I always say, you have to go, if you always look at the same place to hire people, or you always go to the same group of people to get those referrals, you're going to get the similar referral or the similar, and you have to be really out there looking and fishing in different ponds. And I referred to that before, where if you keep fishing in the trout pond, you're probably going to catch a trout. If you want to catch bass, you're going to go to a bass pond, right? And so I think that's the thing. You have to really think about it and how you're going to get there, because it is possible. And you can get great talent.
I agree with both Virginia and Rob. You have to be strategic. I just a few months ago, I phased off of a board that I had been on for a few years, and it happened so quickly, and there really was no strategy in how we will bring the next people in. And we just started throwing out names, and I said, we need to really think about the age of the people that are coming in, and you have to be pretty strong, and you have to have pretty thick skin, because oftentimes if you're not, I would say senior leadership, people, if you haven't had as much experience, they don't always necessarily listen, but it's so important for people to speak up and to be strategic, and it can't just be happenstance. Like, you're throwing out names, you have to really think about, okay, who do those people represent? What do those people represent?
Yeah. We do want to reserve some time for our time-honored tradition of questions from the audience, but let me pose a question. I'd like all 4 of you to chime in here, sort of a concluding thought, while we gather up a couple of cards here from the audience. And it would be this question: how would you hope the community would respond in light of these ongoing community-wide conversations about the current and anticipated leadership changes? And let's just go right down the line if we could.
I'm hopeful, and I'm not going to talk about business, but especially in the not-for-profit boards, I'm very hopeful that we as a community start really embracing young professionals, a diverse group of young professionals on all of the boards that are in this community. And I think those young professionals should have a voting spot on the board. Those people don't come with a whole lot of money though. And a lot of times we all know on these boards that you're expected to give money. And to me though, I think you can have the young professionals come on the board and give them the obligation of time and their talent to give to the board. But we need to start cultivating and giving young people the experiences they need to take over as all of us conclude our board membership, and we need new board members.
Yeah, I would echo that, as well as the responsibility of leadership to be proactive in adopting mentees, and the obligation of potential leaders to look for the mentors. And I would also suggest that, in Virginia, we were talking about this earlier, that internships are a great way to help college students, as well as learn more about the diversity that's out there, and not judging somebody by whether they have tattoos or not, but on their performance. And we've seen in my organization, and our great internship operation, that it really, really makes a difference for all kinds of employers, the startups to the established companies. And that's something I think you can do to help with the leadership transition.
I'd like to see us push ourselves outside of our comfort zone and do some of the things that are tough and not always fun to do, and ask some of those awkward questions sometimes. You know, I remember there's a book, it's The Question Behind the Question, and I think the author, his last name is Miller. And it was a book that was given to me by a mentor, and it's just knowing the right questions to ask. And sometimes you just have to, you know, ask something differently so that you can get a different response, so that you can get different viewpoints and different thoughts. But I think that we have to realize it's our responsibility. So we need to be the change that we're all sitting in this room wanting to see.
And I think for me, my hope is to see the community become as intentional as ever. You hear this intentionality thread kind of throughout the conversation about activating every ounce of leadership potential and leadership talent for the greater good of the community. And sometimes for organizations that might mean taking care to look for candidates for leadership positions, be it professional or board service, who may not fit what's a typical mold or what's been the past typical situation. Also for individuals too, it means, you know, being intentional about widening our circles and our networks outside of our normal course of activity. It means being intentional, whether it's senior leaders being on the lookout for younger leaders that they can help develop, or younger leaders being on the lookout for senior leaders that can serve as mentors for them. I think across the board, more intentionality about strengthening our leadership base is my hope.
May I make a comment, because I just want to piggyback?
Certainly.
When you look at your network, I would challenge every one of you to sit down and kind of write a quick list of who your network really is, and then look and say, is my network diverse? And if not, what am I missing from my network? I've done this in a group session, and it's very interesting when you start looking and saying, wow, all these people are just like me, or they're all men, or they're all women, or they're all something. But it's an interesting thing to do, because you'll start to realize how actually somewhat single-threaded sometimes your network is, unless you have really thought this through. So I just challenge everybody to do that.
We always get thought-provoking questions from the audience, and today is no exception. People really think about this and they come prepared. I actually have a typed question here, so here we go. Today's Akron Beacon Journal article about the dearth of women on corporate and nonprofit boards, it was the last sentence that floored me. Quote, change will require an enlightened private sector as well as courageous leadership. And they were quoting Mr. Parker from the Executive Leadership Council in Virginia. The question is this: I heartily agree that it will take enlightened men to exert this change and do the right thing to sustain and grow businesses and nonprofits. But courageous? Is it that frightening, off-putting, and disconcerting for men to have women at the table and to have access to our creativity, reason, and experience? So we have two guys here. Let's start off with them. Rob and Mark, what do you say?
whatever success I have is largely attributed to women. Our foundation, my board would scold me annually and say, we have no diversity here. There aren't any men. And finally, I was adopted as a token woman for the organization. So no, I think you have to be totally intentional and aggressive, and it's not a matter of courage, it's a matter of doing the right thing.
Absolutely, I would agree wholeheartedly with Rob that, there's women in my life, but especially my wife Bethany, to whom whatever I do well is largely attributable, and the rest of it's probably more on me, so I'm thankful for that. And also, I don't think it requires courage, I just think it requires a basic sense of what's right to move forward that way. But sometimes it does mean, I know from when I was hired, it took courage to hire me because I was a 28-year-old who was not what people would expect, and I'm thankful to those who made that decision to hire me, which took some courage, and it may require some decisions that provide opportunities where they may not be in a position that people necessarily expect to fill that role, but still make the decision because it's what's right.
We have quite a few questions here. We're not going to be able to ask them all, but we do have time for certainly 3 or 4 more questions. This next one is one I've heard throughout the community because we have several, how can I say it, demographic layers of generational groups here. So this question I think is timely. How do you foresee Akron area Gen Xers, well, are older I guess, responding to the emergence of millennials in leadership roles in our community? Do they feel like they're being preempted here?
Is that preemption or is that a little hand-wringing? If you want to assume a leadership position, you have to go for it too. And that doesn't mean you're always going to get it, but and it takes hard work and setting the example, and being a team player. And I read that in the Beacon Journal, and it just struck me as maybe not being quite accurate.
I guess I look at a big pivot that's happening. So you have a crossroads. When Leadership Akron was founded, we were at a crossroads where Akron was navigating into the post-industrial economy. Now we're at another crossroads where boomers are hitting retirement age. And I think Xers can be in a great position to help be the transitional form for the pivot to happen, where it's not a jump completely because there's still, it's still decades and decades that boomers will be contributing huge talent and insight and leadership into shaping our community. But when you pivot, you stay connected to your original position, but you also open to a new perspective so that others can enter the picture. And I think Xers can help map that transition for our community.
We've talked during this conversation about being observant and things that we need to focus on. And we also have talked in a general way about potential barriers for achieving a broader base footprint of leadership in our community. Do you see any obvious barriers in our community in particular that would prevent this type of change?
I think one of the things that we need to do is really look, and again, I'll just go to board membership. I mean, you can look at it and I think we really need to look at the bylaws or the manner in which we do recruit people, for instance, onto boards. It's interesting because I know there's a few of them where it's like, well, we want the CEO of the company on the board. Well, there's not a lot of women CEOs around here, right? There's a few of us, but not many. So that kind of, if that's the rule, then, or that's what they're looking for, then a whole group of people are eliminated. So I think one of the things that has to happen is we really have to look at what's the framework we've set up to catch the people for these boards, and does that framework allow people in? I had an interesting conversation yesterday, and it was a not-for-profit in the area, and they were talking about putting YPs onto their board as real members of the board, and they have, I think, a 3-year commitment or a 3-year term. Well, for those of you who employ young people, I said that they don't stay with a company for more than 2, so I'm not sure why they would stay on your not-for-profit. But that's what he was saying to me, was one of the things that we've realized is that's probably doesn't fit with that group of people. A couple of years would probably be a great thing. So I think we just have to look at kind of the paradigm through which we even figure out who comes onto the boards, who we want, how we get them, the monetary, all those things, and say, does this allow people of different backgrounds to actually come into the board just from the get-go? Because we can figure out ways to kind of block people out.
Right. Any further responses on that? We have two more questions. One we can dispatch up pretty easily here. Kind of provocative, but in the interest of full disclosure, we'll answer it. How old is David Hunter? 64. So there you go. But I'd like all four of you to respond to this final question, since there was discussion about risk-taking here. What is the biggest risk you have taken as a leader?
I can answer that. I've recently taken on the presidency of Northeast Ohio Council on Higher Education. We changed our mission from higher education only to significantly increasing educational attainment from pre-K through the entire pipeline. A very lean organization, so that's the biggest challenge I've ever had.
I think one of the risks that I've taken, I don't know if it's necessarily the biggest, but it's just making a change, leaving something that feels comfortable to do something new. And it's important for us to make changes, but it doesn't always feel good. So I think that would probably be, our response.
I'm going to go back to the topic at hand, and this isn't the biggest risk I've ever taken, but I certainly think that I enjoy taking these types of risks, is when you find somebody, and you said it, you can spot leaders, right? You spot these folks who just started with a company, who they're in it to win it, they want to take on every project, they want to be a part of things. And for me, it's really rewarding and I'll use the word risk, I don't think it's, maybe take a little bit of a gamble or a bet on somebody who has what it takes, and to put them into a role, onto a project where everybody's like, oh, what? The person just started, or why would you put them on? But when you have that feeling of this person gets it, and we've got a great story at our place with one young lady. She literally started as the front desk receptionist probably 20-something years ago at our organization. And she's fantastic. And over a period of time of having mentors and developing and really taking ownership of her own career, because that's really an important piece for this young lady who started in that spot will be graduating next year with her executive MBA from Case Western, and she is running the fastest growing business that I have, and she's growing at 20% year over year for years. And that was one of those things where people were like, really? You're like going to put that person over? And it's like, yes, I am. I am, because I know that she can do it. And she has exceeded every expectation, because I told her I thought she could do it. And others told her that. And I think we all need to do that for people.
I think we're going to give Mark, the leader of Leadership Akron, the final word.
Right. Well, probably the biggest risk that I've taken is one that I took alongside our staff team and our board, and that was really expanding Leadership Akron to serve additional audiences of leaders really at every stage of life and career. And it was interesting, because could these programs get traction? Could they stand alongside our signature program without diminishing that experience? And what we've found is that there's a hunger for leadership all across the spectrum, and it's been really encouraging to see each of those programs maintain and sustain traction and impact. And I think it's a testament to our community that there is a hunger to develop leadership for Akron's future.
Virginia, Rob, Traci, and Mark, thank you so much for being here with us today. I think we exceeded expectations in building the conversation around leadership, and look forward to it continuing. On behalf of the Akron Roundtable, it is my pleasure to present each of you, and I'll present this after the luncheon, it'll be easier, with a contemplative sun as a memento of your visit with us here this afternoon at the Roundtable. This celebratory work of art was designed exclusively for the Akron Roundtable by local artist and craftsman Don Drum. Thank you very much. I would also like to recognize, although I'm not sure if we have a contemplative son, David Hunter, our moderator today, who thank you for sharing your talent and your gift of bringing engaging conversation and rich questions to our forum. We invite the audience to join us at the Quaker Station in downtown Akron on Friday. Can everyone say that? Friday? May 15th, when the Akron Roundtable will host Louis W. Sullivan, MD, President Emeritus at the Morehouse School of Medicine. He will present on the topic, Transforming Health, the Health Profession, Turning Mission into Action. Thank you all for being with us here today, and we look forward to seeing you next month.